Welcome back to the DTF Film Sessions. I'm Max Dean. You can find me on Twitter at @TheMaxDean, and I am here with a special guest today. We have Coach Reagan Smith at C Reagan Smith on Twitter. He is offensive coordinator for high school with a bunch of Power Five and NFL players on the resume. We're here to talk about wide receiver Zay Flowers from Boston College. How you doing today, Coach?
Doing great, my man. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting prospect. A lot of people really, really love him. I like him. I think there's a lot to fall in love with. I don't want to get ahead of myself in terms of where I kind of project him to, where I would draft him personally, but there are a lot of traits there, and you can kind of see how you could mold him. But I just think if we're expecting him to come and be a wide receiver one right off the bat, then I think that's pretty unrealistic. So, you had a comp for him that you were talking about before we got started. So, why don't you let us know who that is and why you see that?
All right. So when I watched his film, one of the things that jumps out to me is how someone moves, their similarities in fluidity are, and things like that. And he reads Brandon Cooks on film to me, and I see it in his frame. They are almost identical in size. I went back and looked at their combine numbers. I went back and looked at their college stats. They feel like a very, very similar player in my experience. And I think that might play into his projection as far as I'm concerned.
Right. I can definitely see that comparison. I think the explosion is there. I think the change of direction is there. I think, like you said, the stature is similar. Um, and so Brandon Cooks was kind of before my day in the sense that I that was really the first draft where was paying attention to what was happening, but I wasn't evaluating anybody, right? I was not, you know, ready to do that. I didn't really know what I was looking at, you know what I mean? I was probably stat evaluating at the very best. So I can't necessarily make the comparison as a prospect, but as an NFL player, I definitely see that 100%. And so I think go ahead.
Well, I just think that when I watch Flowers on film, um, he has this vertical takeoff, vertical burst, especially in his outside releases, that is really similar to Brandon Cooks. And so, the first thought when you see that is, wow, vertical like Brandon Cooks. But what people might not realize is that with the stature that both Flowers and Cooks have, it limits their effectiveness, especially in third downs. That they're just not quite big enough of a target. And
Mhm.
so I really am curious to hear your take and to see moving forward how Flowers develops and if he encounters some of the same issues that Cooks has.
Yeah, I think that based on what I'm seeing here, I can project Flowers to be a little bit more effective in the yak game.
Mhm.
So I feel like if you put him in an offense that really accentuates that, whether it's like the 49ers or a team that runs a similar style of offense, you can get a lot of third down efficiency out of him because you're giving him some space to work with. So you're not really forcing him into contested situations. Um, I think he needs to work on route running to develop more separation, just 1v1. That's going to come with time. That's why I would really look at this guy more late in the first round to early in the second round. I know that some guys have talked about him going as high as the Patriots. Um, I don't really think that's a good call personally, but to each their own. So let's look at some of the tape here, and then we can kind of use that and bounce off of it. So, all right. So, first play here, I'm going to let it run through and then we can kind of bounce off of it. So, it's relatively tight split. He's playing on the right side.
It's where he does a lot of his work.
it gives him more option in terms of whether he's and then honestly the end zone footage for him for most of these is not that useful. So it gives him an advantage against corners where he gets more of a
Two-way.
two-way go.
Mhm.
Exactly. And I think for him that's a big deal because that he's so shifty that that's challenging for a lot of corners to keep up with. But at the same time, like he's decelerating a bit too early for me on this route, right? So
Mhm.
we're going to be somewhat critical of him, and I just wanted to be clear that as a prospect, there is a lot to like, but we're just kind of pointing out maybe why he's not at the top of this receiver class. So he's decelerating a little bit too early for me. So the DB here is still not really sure if he's going to go deep or not, because he is still a threat. It's clear that defensive coordinators have pointed out that he's, the number one threat for Boston College. But
I definitely
for a
see.
good, go ahead.
Look, um, he doesn't. I love a ton about his game. I love the fact that he's a team player, or seems to be. He's super athletic. He doesn't attack corners. He's
Hmm.
trying to get around them. And I think it really hurts him, especially in this intermediate comeback, sit down. He doesn't get the separation you're looking for because he doesn't threaten, even though he has the tools to do that.
Right. So here, instead of driving on the corner and then powering down right in front of them and then turning and coming back to the ball, he's trying to turn as he decelerates, and it's just not enough of a sell job. Now, he still wins, but I don't think that he's winning this route versus a decent NFL corner. And a good quarterback gets him that ball,
Yeah.
but he has to work with what he's got here. But you can definitely see the physical tools. I'm gonna like if I let it run in full speed again.
Mhm. Yeah. So, like, something we talk about when we're coaching receivers, right? Is at the top of the route, I need that thing to snap. I don't
Hmm.
need you to float upfield. And when you float upfield, you float into coverage. You allow them a window to undercut. That you give the defense opportunity. And so I need the top of that route to snap, and we just kind of float a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. And there's some of the good stuff, like the subtle shift outside before a little inside move, and you can see that it does kind of put the corner on his heels a little bit. But because his technique's not that clean, he also doesn't have the best balance coming out of that break either.
He
It's
does do
also kind
some.
of a
He does do
go
some
ahead.
instinctive things. As we watch this film, we'll notice he does some things that are really difficult to coach. Um, where, like you talked about, the kind of the inside outside stuff at the top of that route and everything. And so it's almost like he does these instinctive things well, but things that I would consider coaching points, they're not as sharp.
And this is also kind of interesting, the fact that he's he comes inside. Like it's almost like a deep reverse whip route, like,
Yeah,
I'm not sure why he turns outside to come inside. That's kinda weird, but I don't know if that's just a natural feel thing for him, but it's a little uncommon. But then also, one of the other things that you gotta point out that you love about him is, he doesn't give up on the play, right? So he's eyes on the quarterback. He sees that he's breaking out. He's going to the outside and then adjusts beautifully. That's something he does phenomenally. He's really, really good ball skills, great at adjusting down the field, keeps his feet in bounds, both feet. So
he's
definitely a lot of
very
positive there.
he's very active. He keeps his motor on. He's constantly working for the football in a lot of instances, and those are things that I really like about him.
And then we can see the catch on the sideline. So like
Mhm. He makes a lot
catch,
of
turn
things
upfield.
look he makes a lot of things look really effortless. In my
Yes.
notes on Flowers, just super smooth, super fluid. Everything's really natural feeling. That
Mhm.
goes back to the instincts. He has a pretty high degree of suddenness, good change direction, plus acceleration. Just watching him at the combine, watching him go through the gauntlet drill, it just felt like something that he doesn't have to think about. It just happens.
Mhm. Yeah. No, I absolutely agree, and I feel like you can see that on tape too. And if, I think, there's always the balance of how much do you think about it? How much focus do you put on your routes? Because does that take away from some of the natural feel? I think it's just going to take a little bit of time, and just the development of a plan and understanding how to attack corners leverage a little bit more. It's going to help him a lot. But let's jump into the second play here. So he doesn't get the ball on this one. He's down here on the closer side of the screen. And I wanted to put this one in because so he takes a false step there,
Yeah.
and he doesn't really drive on the corner here either. And he kind of gives up that he's going outside too early, right? We don't really see an inside sell for him.
It was like he's stemming an outside release go, which is what you would like to see on you know, on a comeback. But he just doesn't sell the outside release of it. Like once he starts to, he attacks for I don't know 5-7 yards, and then he starts his outside release. Once he starts that outside release, instead of like just accelerating, he kind of starts gliding, and that's
Hmm.
where you get the hips turn. That's where you get the threat, and he just isn't a threat.
Yeah. So, I mean, where he begins, essentially begins his break to where he finishes it, there are just way too many steps involved. It's
Right.
just not, it's not sudden enough. So it's one, two,
You're
three,
like, what are we
four.
doing now? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And he's just like he's kind of just and he has the suddenness, the stop start to do it too. That's the thing. Like this is not something that he lacks. It's just an understanding of how to use it. It's going to take time. And that's what I'm talking about winning one-on-one, right? Even on the last play, it wasn't really a great one-on-one win even though he did end up with the ball and making a play. And then here he never really gives himself a chance to win this route. And he's definitely the better player in this situation. More
All right.
talented.
Now, one thing we do have to keep in mind, and this is one of those things, is somebody breaking down film that we don't know. All right. And
Right.
this is where discipline comes into play. Is that we don't know if this is just like a called go to the single receiver on the other side,
Hmm.
and he
Yeah,
knows that
that
he's
could be.
getting the ball.
Yeah, I agree. The only thing that I'll say is that like, and maybe this is asking a lot of a young guy, but like my for me, I would want every single rep to at least be practice, right?
Like,
So like
well,
even if
yeah.
it's a called go, I would still want to like, get the most out of that.
Well, you want the defender to never know when
Hmm.
it's happening, like, and if you've got one speed for when the ball's coming to me and another speed for when it's not, that's a tell.
Right.
But I mean, I could see this being a situation where he's 90 to 95% because he knows the ball's going away.
I wish that they featured him more effectively. I really do when I was watching this tape. Just two games I watched and it just felt like so many times they just used him as just a decoy, just motion in the backfield, or like at the end of games, they were just kind of like non-committally just giving him the ball underneath and just saying, go try and make a play. But it was just too late. I don't know that much about Boston College or their coaching staff or who they had on the roster, but I just felt like there were a lot of better ways that they could have utilized. And it's easy for me to say sitting here, but it's just what I saw. All right, let's go to the third play here.
This is when
All
his
right.
instincts really showed up to me.
Mm-hmm.
So he's in this tight split off the ball, and he looks like he's blocking down. And it feels with that. It's so hard to teach. Like guys acting. See that? See the breakdown? Like he
Mm-hmm.
looks like he's about to block, and then he's just out of it. And to me, that's not something that I can't teach that in a drill.
Yep, I agree. There's a feeling for that, and one of the things that sells that is his willingness to block in general, right? Like if you never actually block, then no one's going to take you seriously ever. You know what I mean? Like no one's like it just
Right.
is not going to be a point of sale. So and then he comes around, and this is where more instincts come into play, where he takes a really nice angle on this. Like you can kind of see he's driving on the back, like on the linebacker here, and then he's able to just slightly adjust the route and wrap around, which is just a feeling for zone coverage. I think he's much better versus zone than man. And then really nice adjustment on the ball. Like he's moving pretty fast. No
Right.
problem turning to catch that. Finds his feet, gets upfield, puts a move.
And let me
So I
tell
feel
you,
like
that play is much harder to execute than it might seem on the film. The patience, finding the window and just bringing it all the way across on this, this over route. Uh, it's difficult to make this work, and he just finds it. He kind of feels the spacing between him and the flat defender. It's pretty good.
it is, and you also have to run at the right speed where you're not running yourself to the sideline too quickly. So
Right.
there's just a lot good here, and this is kind of why I talk about him being very effective in a system where there's some space created for him, and then he can just use his instincts in within that space to just get a lot done. And then you can see here from the end zone, you're going to be able to see the catch a little bit better too.
This is also an opportunity for us to talk about something. All right, so he uses these, negative splits, these tight splits, and it gives him kind of the two-way go we talked about. It also makes him a threat across the field like it is right here. My question is he going to be able to do that in the NFL? Is he going to be able to cross the field in the NFL with backers having the ability to get hands on him?
I think, yeah. I mean, I would say you just have to make sure that you're scheming it up right. I mean, I don't think you want to make him like an outright slot receiver.
Mhm.
I think you got to be careful about trying to make him take a whole bunch of hits from safeties and linebackers. But I think that you know, I think you can. I think it's also going to take time because if you insert those types of plays enough early on while you're not asking too much of him, you help develop his ability one on one versus man coverage or just lining up truly, wide outside, then I think you can. And I think then eventually when he's a more fully developed receiver, then you can feature him in a variety of different ways. I think fit's going to be important for him for his early production and development. That's probably true for everybody, but I do think that it will translate
Well,
or
number
it can
one,
translate.
he's going to have to end up in a scheme that's friendly to his skill set. Now that like you said, that's kind of everybody, but I can see him getting lost in certain schemes, and I can see him, being accentuated by other schemes. The
Hmm.
interesting aspect of the Brandon Cooks comp. So Brandon Cooks is this anomaly where he's kind of like a wide receiver 1B, and that's why he gets traded so often because
Hmm.
he has like a lot of these attributes of a number one receiver, and then he has these attributes that make him not as productive. He doesn't catch nearly as high a percentage of his targets as other receivers, and it doesn't have to do with like hands or anything like that. It has to do with catch radius. And
Hmm.
with Zay Flowers being slightly smaller than Brandon Cooks, does that make him a firm number 2 guy? And then now that brings me to the question of, okay, if he's a firm number 2 guy, then where does he fit on your draft board? I know that people have him in that 20 to the end of the first round, beginning of the second round range. And obviously, the talent in the draft speaks to where he will go. But how much are you willing to spend a first round draft pick on a guy that projects as a number 2?
Yeah, I mean, he definitely projects as a number 2 to start his career, and the question is just long term. There are smaller players who have been able to do it. Um, a- I think the tenacity with which he plays, I would love to just say that that's the way that he approaches everything, and you can kind of trust that he's going to make the most of the opportunity. I don't think that's a guarantee. Um, you know, Yeah, I think one of the things is you're gonna need to have conversations with this guy, and even though I certainly haven't, I know that the general feeling is that people have loved coming out of meetings with him, so that might push him up a little bit as well. There might be some faith in that projection, but so this is just a blocking play, but he's not just kinda getting in the way, like, he is putting hands on. He loves to lull receivers to sleep and then just get a nice shot on him, and he'll
Mhm.
engage. Anytime the play is to his side, he gets in as much as possible. And sometimes even sometimes if the receiver's not playing off, which a lot of guys do because of his speed, but if the receiver's not or if the DB is not playing off, even on run plays that don't go to his side, he's still happy to make contact with them. So like you mentioned, it's not necessarily the first thing you think when you see his stature, but he's more than happy to do so.
Absolutely. Like, okay, so at the receiver position, I just see so many guys take the play off or just put hands on somebody, watch just a lot of things you don't want to see. And for a guy that's 5'9", 182 pounds, it's refreshing to see somebody go be physical. Now, he goes, he gets a good punch, gets, a good initial contact or whatever, and then he kind of loses the block because of the narrow base or whatever. But just the willingness at that size and being this receiving threat to go get involved in blocking is plus in
Mhm.
my evaluation.
I agree. I mean, you're not necessarily featuring him as a lead blocker on a regular basis, but just getting in the way of a DB enough is a lot of times really helpful, and it also plays into the mind game between a receiver and a corner, right? If you battle throughout the course of a game, if you're getting physical with them, like they just find it annoying. They find it frustrating. It's not something that they have to deal with a lot, even at the NFL level, and so your willingness to just aggravate him is great. That's one of the reasons I love Christian Gonzalez because, he is more than happy to just give a receiver a shove at the end of the play for no good reason. And it's frustrating, it's aggravating. And this is kind of the opportunity to do that on the reverse side of the field. So this is the last play. We're going to get out of here fairly quickly, but let's see what he's got to offer.
Much better
There.
base there against a much bigger corner.
Hmm.
I mean, it's pretty
Yeah.
obvious.
And
Even from this distance, that guy's got him by, you know, 4 or 5 inches and several pounds.
yeah. And again, always be the last one to make the push.
Yeah.
As long as push it to the point where you're not getting a whistle, but if you get to be the last one with hands on, again, that's frustrating. So you turn says something. So get the block, drive on the block, plays over. DB tries to shrug you off, say no, I'm still here. So it's little things that really speak to the mentality, more than a skill set per se. But I mean, like I said, I understand why people fall in love with him. There are definitely things that are really fun to watch on tape. I just think you just need to be aware about what you can expect out of him early in his career and have a very clear plan for development for him. And any scheme that features a fair amount of um, built-in yak is probably going to really help him out a lot. But all right, so that's going to do it for Zay Flowers. It's been fun. You can find me on Twitter at @BMaxDean. You can find Coach at C Reagan Smith. Now, we are also going to have him on for our live stream. This will come out after the live stream, but if you find this, you can go back and find it, because we're going to be talking about offensive line with Kyron and some of our favorite prospects in the draft as well. So I definitely encourage you to do that. It's going to be an awesome conversation. And you can find us live every Monday and Thursday, as well as all of our breakdowns and written content published at DefiantTakesFootball.com. Coach, appreciate you coming on. Thank you very much, man.
I appreciate you having me.